Monyde BENSON. After Monyde gave me water at the river, we became best friends and traveled together in the following days. I believed that he would be a good leader when he grew up because even though he was very young, I got courage from him because he never complained of any difficulties. When we became thirsty, hungry, or tired from the long walking, he just kept quiet. Adults praised him for being the bravest and strongest of all the boys on our trip. I think he was. At Pochala, after walking 3 days, Monyde suddenly became sick. They said it was yellow fever. Kwani did everything he could do to help Monyde, but he died in only 2 days. He'd crossed that whole desert, even though they said he couldn't do it. He'd survived when many big people died, but we buried him just half-mile from safety. I was so sad to lose my brave friend. I knew I would never forget him. We suffered another sadness in Pochala when the SPLA conscripted Kwani, who had been caring for us. Without our uncle, it was really not safe for us, little boys alone. Without Monyde and Kwani, I was beginning to give up hope that we would survive. At least the soldiers put us in a lorry to take us to the refugee camp of Panito in Ethiopia. The lorry, though, was full with a lot of people who spoke different dialects. For the first few hours out of Pochala, Ethiopia was flat, and the dark mud had dried and cracked like an old woman's skin. It was the dry season, and the Gilo River was low and slow. After we crossed the river, the land became hilly, and the lorry dipped and climbed. I don't know what made me sit there next to a Noor man and his wife that day, but when the movement of the truck caused me to fall across her legs, the man grabbed me by the belly with his right hand. His fingers dug into my tummy, and he shook me up and down, hitting me against his knee. I cried, but nobody cared. He was breaking my intestines. Emmanuel tried to help me by grabbing the man's hand until the man let me go, clenched his fist, and hit Emmanuel on his nose. It was serious. Emmanuel fell unconscious. Still no one cared. They just pushed Emmanuel away as if he was a dead body. There was nothing I could do but sit beside him and wait for him to awaken. Was this what it was like in this country? I thought about my home, my mother and father, my brothers and sisters, Monyde, and was worried what would become of us in this far-off place, the refugee camp they called Panito. Emmanuel awoke when the lorry stopped. The driver told us to get down. There wasn't much around, and I thought it was just a place to rest before we continued our journey. No, the adults told us. This is Panito. It was not what I had expected. The elders had told us there would be schools and thousands of people and that we would be safe. There were thousands of people, but only a few shelters made of sticks and branches for protection from the sun. Not one school. The whole place was full of the smoke of small fires that mingled with the dust. People were everywhere, chopping trees, burning new clearings, coming and going from the river with tins and gourds of water. Sick boys lay quietly on the ground. It had been the dry season when 3 months earlier I had left my village, so I was surprised to see new shoots of maize and sorghum sprouting near the river. The rains had begun, and green grass leaves were emerging from the withered soil. We were left in an open place and told to wait for the corn to be distributed. Emmanuel, Lino, Benjamin, and I found a tree to sit under, but I was overwhelmed by thirst. My stomach still hurt badly from being squeezed by the man on the lorry. When I asked someone for water, they pointed the way to the river. In spite of my painful stomach, I didn't hesitate and went alone, following the path made by the people who were carrying the water. I don't know what was wrong with people that day. I tried asking everyone on the way with water to give me a drink, but after 5 people refused, I gave up and didn't ask again. On my way to the river, I encountered dark brown skeleton boys swarming everywhere and making a lot of noise, fighting had broken out between the Dinka and the local Ethiopian Anuak people, a small Nilotic tribe who spoke a different dialect but had the same custom of removing the 6 lower teeth. Some of the Dinka boys had stolen corn from their fields, and one of the boys was shot dead by an arrow. The other boys were fighting back for their dead brother. When I came out of the cornfield just near the river, I met a man on the path holding a club. There were many other people, some carrying dirty clothes going to the river to wash, and others returning with water containers. But this man thought any boy walking barehanded was a fighter, and he struck me with his club on my right thigh. Ah, the pain! I thought he'd broken my leg. I fell down, and he left me alone as he went to attack other boys who were not carrying water or clothes. Once the pain subsided, I got up and limped down from the dry stream bed, away from the man with the club. There I met 3 girls dressed like Dinka and carrying water pots. They were talking when I first spotted them coming out of the grass, but they stopped when they saw me. "I'm thirsty," I said, thinking they spoke Dinka. "Can you give me some water, please?" They fixed their eyes on me and set their pots down so quickly my heart went beating. Putting a hand on each hip, they walked toward me, throwing words I didn't understand. I staggered backwards. When they began to throw stones, I turned and ran. What would have happened if I had met men? Panito didn't seem like the safe place they had told us we were going to. Even the girls were aggressive. When I finally arrived at the river, it was full of people washing their clothes and swimming. Soap foam leaked along the bank, yet people still took drinking water home in their pots and gourds. Across the river, the clearing fires had licked off every leaf, leaving only gray tree skeletons and dry grass. People swam across and strolled in the charred ground, scavenging for charcoal. I stared at this ugly place, where no boy seemed safe. This was Panito. Every boy was on his own. At first, Panito brought tears to every boy. The Ethiopia people were peaceful and didn't seem to like wars when we first came marching into their land. They called those of us in the camp Little Sudan, and made fun of Sudanese, saying, "Big Sudan knows only wars, small Sudan knows only stealing. Sudanese people are crazy. We were starving, and the Ethiopians were experiencing hard times because we were stealing their food." There were thousands of people, many of them boys, but no houses or latrines. Everyone in the camp, 10,000 boys already, and more coming, went into the bush for latrine. Swarms of flies followed us wherever we went. They liked to sit on us and bite and pick and spread the common killer diseases, dysentery and diarrhea. Many boys became very sick. There was little food or medicine. Many died. To survive, we used all of the little strength we had to scavenge for food. We were so hungry, we went into wet grasses with frogs and green snakes spitting all around us to collect the kind of grass leaves that we could cook for soup. To do that, we first had to sneak into the Ethiopian market to search the trash heaps for rusted Ethiopian beer tins in which we could cook our soups. The market was forbidden to us because many boys were tempted to steal. The grasses made my skin bumpy, and when we cooked them for soup, my throat itched. Many of the boys got sick and died from eating grass soups, but it was often all we had. Older boys who knew how to swim well went up the river into the Aniuak village lake with their fish spears and brought home fish for themselves. They sold some of their fish to Ethiopian locals and did whatever they wanted with the money. Some bought clean-looking clothes, while the youngest of us scuffed around in rotting rags. My red underwear I had worn crossing Sudan and an old shirt I'd found in the trash heap were my only clothes, and I shared them with all the lice I picked up on the way. When I went swimming, I'd put my clothes in the hot sand by the riverbank, but it was difficult to get rid of the lice entirely because the pure white nits wouldn't die in the sun. The lice tingled me at night and kept me scratching while sleeping. I became so weary of the itching that one night, when they wouldn't let me sleep, I took off my clothes and put them by the fire to warm them up. When I put more sticks in the fire, There was smoke and then flames. I was enjoying the warmth, holding my clothes up to kill the nits and lice, when a tongue of flame touched my red shorts and melted one side. I tried to put them on again, but there was a hole right through one side. My favorite piece of clothing, the only thing I owned that was from my village, was nearly destroyed. In the morning, I searched the garbage and found a green rag, and used a thorn and sock thread to sew up the hole. Dirty, torn, patched, full of lice and nits. My red shorts were still precious to me. 100 times a day I looked at them and remembered that they were a gift from my father. My hair was a lice kingdom too. We had no scissors or razor to shave it off. You could buy a razor with only 2 birr, the Ethiopian currency, but I had nothing, so the lice came. One hot day while I was swimming in the river, my head tingled so badly with things crawling and biting that I felt like going crazy. I picked a rusted piece of tin from the trash and bent it and broke it into pieces. I asked my friend Nicodemus to cut my hair and offered to cut his in return. We sat under the mango tree. As he cut, big lice dropped on my shoulders and crawled away like fat sesame seeds with my blood boiling in their abdomens. We had scabies across our bodies, even on our hands and buttocks. Some boys walked around with hundreds of flies following them and then sitting on the white wound spots created by a ringworm. No matter how tall their hair grew, it couldn't be shaved while those wounds were open. One day we were informed that white people were coming from Addis Ababa to look at our situation. Many boys gathered to welcome 2 men and 3 women visitors. Curious to see a white man for the first time, we shoved to get a close view of them. "Look at them," one boy said. "Did their skin melt off from flying near the sun in the skyboat or what?" They walked around the camp and the women cried bitterly as they saw a naked little boy, his anus running with bloody diarrhea, struggling to cook a kind of grass soup by himself, who looked like he would die that day. One woman took something from her pocket and gave it to a boy sitting in the front. More boys gathered around her and touched her hand. She cried and rubbed her hand on them. The 2 white men began talking, but we couldn't understand them. As adults translated for us, "They are UNHCR, and they are coming to look at your situation. The women are crying because they feel sorry for your suffering. Be strong," they said. "They will bring some more blankets, food, and medicine, for they have seen enough suffering out of you. They will help you." We clapped our dry, cracked hands and saw that the white men moved their heads up and down like happy salamanders. They began giving out small pebbles to the boys in the front, and those who got the things put them in their mouth and said they were called sweets. The adults did their best to keep us from getting near them, but we wanted to hear the whiteskins telling us that good things would come. It was months later before the UN came to rescue us from hunger, but even this caused many deaths, not because the food was insufficient or bad, but because a lot of boys tried to eat their fill without grinding the grain. They died of tummy swelling at night, and nothing could save them. Also, the vegetable oil brought by the UN made the boars more likely to sicken and die from yellow fever. At Panito, we used empty metal ammunition boxes to carry our food. With 5 boys to 1 ammunition box, and each group of boys called a circle, we put the box in the middle and started with each boy taking his turn of 1 scoop until we came back to the one who had started. When the time for the food distribution came, the cooks announced, "Ammunition tins! Bring the ammunition tins!" and a boy from each group went to collect the food. Life did not improve much with the UN food. The powdered milk was diluted with so much water that it didn't taste like milk. All the Dinka boys had either come from a fishing area or were used to meat from the hunters in our village. A lot of the boys could not eat the grain. It was hard to get meat for them until we discovered a spot in the nearby river where we young ones could fish. A few boys were taken by crocodile, but still no one gave up fishing because it was the best source of meat. Other boys were bird catchers who used small threads from nylon food sacks, stones, and long sticks to build clever traps. Crowds of beggars followed whoever killed a lot of birds. "Give me one bird." "Cool, I am so hungry and caught nothing. I will pay you tomorrow." "These are for my sick brother admitted in the clinic. You were my friend, remember?" "What about me? What about me?" One boy, Beak, became crazy about birds. He woke everybody in the middle of the night with his shouting, "Who is going out to catch the birds with me? My traps caught 4 birds, one for me and one for my father if he comes, one for my mother if she comes, and one for my sister if she comes too. My twin brother, he could have mine if he wants. There, I want to go catch the birds. Who wants to go with me?" Even though Bach's twin brother had gotten sick from eating the grass soup and died in the clinic, Bach never gave up catching imaginary birds for him. "Back, back," we'd say in the middle of the night. "No birds out at night. Go to bed and we will catch them tomorrow." We held him and told him to go back to bed, but he'd say, "No, no, I can hear the birds flapping their wings on my traps. My 2 traps have caught some birds. You want to steal my birds?" Sometimes an adult came out and said Bach had to be tied up until morning. They would take him away. There were many boys who lost their minds because of sickness, thinking about their parents. They were put together in the place called the Crazy People Clinic. It was bad because they ran around putting plastic sheets on their shoulders and beating themselves with large sticks. They would beat anyone they saw near them. Some got hurt and died of injury. Some could not feel the pain. In the middle of one night, I heard a rapping noise under my bed. Then a voice said, "Hey, people with plastic bags." Under my bed, I had a plastic bag with the soap I used to wash my scabies wounds. There was more ripping of plastic noises from under me. I was scared and jumped from my bed to the bed of Adder, the boy next to me. "What are you doing?" "There is something or someone under my bed. Listen, can you hear that?" The guy under my bed heard me and said, "Hey there, is that you, Mama? Answer me. Are you chewing UN plastic like me?" "He is a crazy one," Adder whispered. "Be careful." We kept quiet and didn't answer. I sat on the edge of Adder's bed until morning. By then the crazy boy had gone, but he'd torn my plastic bag and soap into pieces with his teeth. I swept up the plastic bits and soap particles and scratched the new sores I could no longer wash. I thought of my mother and how she'd wash my body in the cool river. I thought of my father telling me no harm would ever come to me with him by my side.